Krista and Emery and I watching the Super Bowl out by the pool yesterday, a family affair. That's the first time I've watched a complete football game this year, more than 10 minutes. I used to watch college ball on Saturdays, NFL, of course, on Sundays, NHL, not anymore. I just look at little bits and pieces. I'll watch 5 minutes of a game, 10 minutes tops. But yesterday we made it a family Super Bowl barbecue, family out at the pool, and some great time together. I'm really happy again for Coach Andy Reid. I just think that he's one of the class guys in the NFL and all of coaching. His players love him. His players respect him. He's one of those rare coaches who can be liked, and he's also respected, and it's a deadly combination. His players don't want to let him down. That's a rare thing in coaching, where not only do you run a disciplined organization and team, but your players love and respect you, and you have that superpower motivation. Your players never ever want to disappoint you. So really happy to see Coach Reid win his second Super Bowl against the team that fired him a few years ago. Raw deal in Philly, just couldn't get over the hump. And the NFL, ferocious competitors, and there's one parade every year like every other league. And Andy was an incredibly successful head coach. Definitely a wizard when it came to play calling. But in Philadelphia, like everywhere else, you got to win. So when he was given his walking papers in Philly, it was interesting to see. I thought he would be like a lot of coaches and take a year off, maybe spend some time relaxing or with family or going and sitting on TV. Can always do that for a year, stay in the public eye. But he did none of that. I remember it was only days, maybe a couple of weeks, until he signed with Kansas City. And when you bring in a man like Andy Reid and you draft a player like Patrick Mahomes, that's a winning combination. It's not a matter of when, it's a matter of when, it's also a matter of how many. That's 2 out of 3 if I'm counting right. Brady beat him head to head, but pretty amazing, and just nice to see one of the really good leaders in the NFL win another ring. So it's interesting. I'm just finishing up Jimmy Johnson's book, Swagger, and Coach Johnson won 2 Super Bowls with Jerry Jones in Dallas a couple of decades ago. And Coach Johnson took those teams from 1-15 his first year to he won his Super Bowl 4 years in, and then in his 5th year he won a second Super Bowl. So he rebuilt that Cowboys franchise from the outhouse to the penthouse. But it's interesting reading the couple final chapters in his book. This book is his memoirs. It's called Swagger. Get it and read it. I've read all Jimmy Johnson's books. They're all fantastic. There's a book on the rebuild in Dallas. There's a book on him going to Miami Dolphins and going there and working with Dan Marino and aging Dan Marino. And then there's this one, Swagger, which is, I think, the best of the bunch. But like every elite achiever, I mean, I'm talking the best of the best. I'm talking about 0.01 percenters. who are the best in the world, or at least in the conversation for being the best in the world, the price that they pay. And they pay it consciously most of the time. But I think of Andy Reid and everything he's been through in terms of his boys, what happened with his sons. And, that's just got to be a brutal situation for a mom and a dad. But the hours these guys put in as an NFL coach, as an NBA coach, NHL coach, that's my area was minor pro hockey, junior hockey. The hours are endless. And I sat down with my friend and client, Claude Julien, who was the head coach of the Boston Bruins when they won the Stanley Cup. Claude has coached the Montreal Canadiens. He was an assistant with our Canadian Olympic team. He's coached in New Jersey. He's won a Stanley Cup with Boston. And I asked Claude one time, I said, why do guys like you get married? Why do guys like you have kids? I don't get it. Because I asked him, he said, the average day is 14 hours a day. That's if you're at home. With video, power play meetings, strength and conditioning, one-on-one meetings, travel, 84 game schedule. The year they won the Cup, Claude said they played 111 games to win the Stanley Cup. Between exhibition, regular season, and the playoffs, 111 games. His summer that year, he said, was something like 59 days. 59 days. And he's never, ever, he's never, ever truly off or away from it. So I asked him, I said, why do coaches in the NFL, why do coaches in college, why do coaches in the NBA and in the NHL, why do they get married and have kids? He's like, it's just for that 5% of the time that we want to feel normal. It's that 5% of the time that we want to go home and we want to sit at home. We want to enjoy our home, our family, our wife, our children, and we want to be like everybody else. And he said 5% of the time. And Tim Grover mentioned this in his book, Relentless. He talked about Jordan and those guys, how they're total cleaners, a cleaner being the elite of the elite of the elite. Kobe's a cleaner, Tom Brady a cleaner, that kind of stuff, right? So interesting is these guys, like 95% of what they're doing is totally focused on, what they're trying to achieve, winning another Super Bowl, trying to do this, trying to do that. But good morning. And but there's this tiny part of them, whether it's 2% or 1%, where they just want to go home, get out of the public eye, whatever it was, and just be normal for a few hours. And Grover would say, Jordan was like that, Kobe was like that, Charles Barkley was like that. And then when they're recharged after a few hours, they're back into the grind again. And that has to be, the only reason that professional coaches, especially sports coaches, like, why does a guy like Elon Musk get married? Why does a guy like Elon Musk have children? I mean, he literally works 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, to a man, that any of these elite guys, whether they're in business, whether they're in professional sports, where I know a lot of them, amateur sports, to a man, at the end of it all, no matter how many Super Bowls they've won, no matter how many Stanley Cups they've won, they have massive regrets. And I find that part of it sad, because I respect the fact that they're about the one thing. They're about the one thing. Patrick Mahomes is about the one thing, winning Super Bowls. Michael Jordan was about one thing, winning championship rings. Tom Brady was about one thing. Wayne Gretzky was about one thing. Mark Messier was about one thing. Nick Saban's about one thing. These guys are not, telling you how to think, pushing their political beliefs onto you, criticizing the country they live in. It's about the one thing. So I have so much respect for that. James Cameron in the movie industry, it's about the one thing. J.K. Rowling, it's about the one thing. Stephen King, it's about the one thing. All the best of the best, the greatest of all time, it's about the one thing. But the problem with that, and this is what I teach in my Badass Brotherhood, is when you go all in on just the one thing. When you go all in on just the one thing, there's so much collateral damage on everything else. So it's a fine line, you've won the Super Bowl, but you're on your third marriage. You win two Super Bowls back to back in Dallas, but you don't know your two sons. There's some interesting things, and these are the words of these guys. It's not me saying, from the cheap seats. Every great coach I study, every great leader I study, every great achiever, they all have that. You know what? I wish I would have spent more time with my wife and children. So that's why that's been such a focus of my life and my training, because I was on the path to leading that life of one thing. When I was coaching minor pro hockey at the age of 25, 26, I didn't even have a girlfriend. I was just living, in an apartment. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. That really worked. The one thing, nobody could outwork me. Nobody could outwork me. But then my dad and mom gave me that heads up when I got fired from my first pro job. And they said, where do you see yourself in 10, 20, 30 years? Do you see yourself having a family? Do you see yourself married? Do you see yourself traveling? Do you see yourself coaching your own children? And that's where my mind changed. I had a mental shift. I had a huge shift to controlling my own destiny, to being in control of my own life. And that's when I pivoted to entrepreneurship. Because entrepreneurship, I watched my dad have time and money freedom. That's what entrepreneurship gave him. No matter how extreme the work was, he was a free man. He had time freedom and he had financial freedom. The second part of his career, he had both of those things. So to me, and that's what I talk to my daughter about, if you want time freedom, number one, you have to work for yourself. And if you want true financial freedom before you're old, before you retire and depend on a pension or something, I said, you got to be an entrepreneur. You must run your own show. So that's when I shift from full-time sports into entrepreneurship. I joined my dad's insurance agency and the rest is history. But I wouldn't be walking here talking to you on the streets of Naples if I had coached pro hockey. I might be in the NHL. I might not be in the NHL. I might be a head coach in Germany or Switzerland, or I might be on my second or third marriage. I might have kids that, I don't have any connection with, or kids that I don't see. Like, I've seen some of the craziest situations in sports. I've seen fathers, that coach in Europe, Canadians and Americans, where they don't see their kids for like 8 months. They don't see their family for 8 months. I'm like, oh, that must be amazing. You got a coaching job over in England, or you got a coaching job in Switzerland, or you got a coaching job in Slovakia. That must be an amazing experience and adventure for your family. Oh no, my family's not with me. It's just me. And I'm just like, wow, What a brutal, price to pay. And I think there's a piece of a man like that that's like, they want to be on their own. It's an escape. It's a way to sedate. It's a way to medicate. It's a way to check out. That's my harsh opinion of that. I mean, what coach, what man doesn't want his queen with him? What man doesn't want his children? But Jimmy Johnson, I mean, he's brutal on himself in these final chapters of the book. Do you know he said in his 30 years of coaching before he hit the big time, and even when he did hit the big time, talking about his two sons who are, they have their own families now, they never once in 30 years, till these kids were 30 at least, never once did they have a sit-down family dinner. Not one time. Not Christmas, not New Year's, not an anniversary, never once in 30 years did Jimmy Johnson join his family at the table and sit down and have one meal. He said the closest they ever came was when his wife put out a buffet when he was there for part of a Thanksgiving day where they watched football on TV. But they never, ever had a dinner together, ever. And the boys confirmed it. They're like, we never, ever could remember one single dinner as a family. I thought that was next to impossible. She would have a dinner maybe in the off season, or Jimmy was like, there was no off season. There was no off season. His boys, when they were at age 8, no more birthday celebrations, no more Christmas celebrations, no more Thanksgiving celebrations, Easter, all that stuff. He didn't know a person's birthday. He didn't know his wife's birthday, his mom's birthday, his dad's birthday, his kids' birthdays, anniversaries. None of it. None of it. Coaching ball, coaching college, coaching in the eventually in the NFL. Not a single dinner ever in 30 years together as a family, which I talk about the importance of. And secondly, he goes, we stopped celebrating things like that. He said by the time the boys were 10 years old. He said they used to pick their Christmas gifts out of a catalog. And his wife at the time would say, okay, pick a few things out, and that was it. But he wasn't there on Christmas Day. He used to talk about he would go months. Think about this for a second. When you think about, winning a Super Bowl, and what people don't see about, Andy Reid and Nick Saban and Bill Belichick and Bobby Knight and and I've seen this, right? This is why I'm sure I've seen this. The ultimate price you pay and the extreme lifestyle is, he said, it wasn't about the dinner. He said, what the hell was it Jimmy was talking about? He was talking about, he never saw either of his boys play football. So they're both Division I scholarship players. They're Pop Warner kids. They're amazing, amazing kids, amazing football players. And they end up getting scholarships, right? To big schools in the States, especially his oldest son, Brent. He saw Brent play for one game in his entire career. And the reason is because he was there to recruit another player. He wasn't even there to recruit, to spend time with his own son. He was only there, and his son knew this, he was only there to recruit another blue chip high school prospect. And, and he lives with that today. He goes, I've never seen my son play football. And then his younger son, Chad, he never laid eyes on him on a football field. Never took, a couple of hours to go watch one of their games. Never stopped by the field to watch a practice. Never, ever, ever, ever watched his kids play football. And both of them were Division I college players. Just insane. Absolutely insane. He said his boys lived in 15 different homes. 15 different homes by college, by when they left for college, and they never stayed in a house more than 18 months, ever. They never ever stayed in a house more than 18 months. It was just coach, move up, coach, move up, coach, move up. The U-Haul always packed. And yeah, what I was trying to remember is, this is insane. This is just insane. He goes, I didn't see my boys when they were kids, like age 8. My daughter Emery's age 10. Those kids change by the hour. If I don't see my kid for a day, I'm just like, I'm in physical pain. Like she changes every day. She's growing up every day. Every day is so precious. So Jimmy, in his book, he writes about how he wouldn't see his 2 boys for months. Read my lips, months at a time. They're living in the same house with his wife, Linda Kay, the 2 boys, and Jimmy would go months without physically seeing them, without saying a word to them. And he explained this away by saying, I would get home at 11 p.m. or later when they're in bed. They're just little boys. And he says, my alarm went off at 4 a.m. every day. Get up at 4 a.m. every day for 30, 40 years. So he's out the door at 5 a.m. He's out the door at 5 a.m. before his wife's up, before his kids are up. And he comes home at midnight. He survived, he said, on 4 hours sleep. Why sleep 8 hours when you can sleep 4? So Jimmy Johnson slept 4 hours a night, midnight to 4 a.m. as an example, sometimes less. And he never saw his kids for months. And they're living in this, by the time they got up at say 6 or 7 o'clock for school, he was long gone. When they went to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock, are you kidding me? Months without seeing his kids. So you can see how a guy like that now lives and carries that guilt. He's ashamed, right? And he's done everything he can to repair those relationships with his 2 boys, but there's only so much that can be done. Those days are gone, right? And now they are friends and all this other horse shit. But oh my God, not seeing your kids for months at a time, never in your life having a sit-down family dinner, never celebrating any birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, none of it. Just focused on winning, getting to a college bowl game, getting the next job. Then it was national championships. Then it was, Super Bowls. And he said, I was married. He goes, I had 45 sons, but they weren't my own, referring to his roster. 45 sons, 50 sons. He says, those were my sons. He goes, I knew everything they were doing. He said, I had no clue what my boys were doing. And to me, that's losing. That is losing at the ultimate level. I love Jimmy Johnson. I've studied him as a coach. I've learned a lot from him as a coach. But man, that's the ultimate to me. That's where you're paying the ultimate price. And he's a man who lives with regret. He's one of those, there's never been any exception on the deathbed, these guys. Like Steve Jobs, that was pathetic at the end of his life. I mean, he talks about he's sick. He never thought he was going to live long, right? That's why Jobs had this whatever, he was just driven, right? Beyond belief. And they always said the reason is because he always believed, he knew, his intuition told him he wasn't going to live a long time. So he was a man on a mission, right? He didn't give a shit about his wife. He didn't give a shit about his kid. Nothing. It was just, work, 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 work. And admittedly, he's like, I was a horrible husband. I was a horrible father. But it gets to the end of his life and he's lying on his deathbed and that's the last thing he spoke about. He didn't speak about, where Apple was going or the iPad or the, the smartphone. None of that stuff. He just talked about the massive regret he had for the family his child and the sacrifice. He just literally was not involved in their lives, and the price he paid, and at the end it was his greatest regret. I mean, he changed the world, you know, for better or worse. That's up for debate, but he certainly brought us tools that can make a positive difference if you're the master of them. But my God, like, to literally work, you know, 20 hours a day, fall asleep for 4, get up and do it again for decades. The man wore the same clothes. He called them uniforms. You always saw a job in the same black turtleneck, the same jeans, and that's because he had 15 pairs. He had 15 pairs of black. He had 15 black turtlenecks. He had 10 pair of jeans. He had the same shoes because he didn't want to think about dressing. He didn't want to have to think about anything but what he was working on. He didn't want to have to think about what to wear, or does this match this. He didn't want to expend any mental energy. He talked about that in his book. So he wore a uniform. He literally wore a uniform so that his entire get out of bed after 4 hours of sleep and just put on his uniform, and he didn't have to expend any mental energy. Like, extreme. There's a reason these guys get top 1% results. Top 0.001%. So my point in this rambling video is just when I see an Andy Reid, or I see a Bill Belichick, or I read about a Jimmy Johnson, or I read about a top author, or a musician, and on. And I'm just like, you know, people don't see the ultimate price that's been paid. They just don't see it. I see it in sports and business because I've been around it. And that's why I'm driven to help men have it all. I'm not talking about life balance. Life balance is a myth. Life balance is bullshit. But I'm talking about having it where you build your own world, where you have personal sovereignty. To me, personal sovereignty is when you have a marriage that's on fire, where you have a special connection with your children, where you are in great physical and mental health. Good morning. And where, you know, you have time for different things. And I mean, it's not life balance, but you have a genuine appreciation for what you have. You have a genuine appreciation for your future. But man, oh man, you build. The secret for me, and what I made the shift, is I transitioned and I built my business around my life, not my life around my business. Even McLean Insurance, when I was single working for my dad, and then I bought the company. The first 3 years there, holy shit, all I did was work. I was a man on a mission. Extreme bursts, short bursts of imbalance, which you have to do. There's no winning without short bursts of imbalance. But to do it for 40 years, like these NFL guys, like these college guys, like, you know, these tech guys, like these Wall Street guys, I'm like, no, thank you. No, thank you, sir. I want to build any company I have around my life. My life comes first. My marriage comes first. My daughter comes first. My physical health comes first. My mental health comes first. This is why I'm out walking 15,000 steps every morning. This is why I'm copywriting and marketing every morning. This is why I'm reading every day. This is why I block out technology use and cell phone use until 11 each day. I'm building my business around my life, not my life around my business. And man, if you've built your life around your business, if business comes first and every crisis in your business, you know, affects your marriage or your relationship with your children, or you can't go on a vacation, man, you got to switch that up. You got to switch that up before you look back like a Jimmy Johnson or a Steve Jobs or any of them. They're all the same. Andy Reid's going to tell that story. He's going to tell that story when he retires about his boys and being involved as drug dealers and being in jail and not being there for him. Belichick's no different. My God, he's got his 2 boys working with him now because he never spent a fucking day with them for like 30 years. So now they want to spend time with them. They want to spend time with them, right? Rex Ryan and his brother, they talk about how they live with their mother for 10 years, of course, divorced, right? Buddy Ryan divorced. He's coaching in Philly. He's coaching in Chicago with Ditka. And the boys talk about, Rex and his brother, they talk about how every summer they'd get to spend the summer with their old man. And what were they doing? They were at the training camp. So the Ryan brothers grew up, inflating footballs, filling water bottles, watching offensive meetings, defensive meetings, sleeping on the cots in the greenskeeper's room at training camp. It was a kid's dream. A kid's dream to be around their dad, who's the head coach or the offensive coordinator. And this is what they remember about their dad. But 10 months a year, they never laid eyes on the guy. He only had them for the summer because they lived in Toronto for a while and they lived in other cities, and Buddy lived in whatever city he was coaching in. He was in Philadelphia, he was in Arizona, he was in Chicago with Ditka. And during the season, admittedly, he wouldn't have time for his boys. So that was they talked about the best times of their lives, Rex and his brother. And they're just like when they were at training camp with their dad, because that's the only time they got to spend. And they got to spend a couple months when they were on vacation, and Buddy would let them hang out at the camp and stay with him and help out. No wonder they both became NFL coaches, right? It's in their blood. But man, I'm so thankful that I made that pivot from all in to the extreme where you have nothing in your life, where you don't have any love, you don't have any friendships, you don't have any connection with anybody else. Like I have an extreme personality for winning, but man, oh man, family comes first. My marriage comes first, my daughter comes first. And I've been able to scratch my coaching itches in a different way. So instead of, being in 70 different cities coaching pro hockey, I bought my own team and coached young men aged 16 to 21. So not only did I, scratch my coaching itch, but I also got to work with young men in a leadership position and change the directions of lives, to help these young men get, Division I and Division III scholarships. And then now coaching my own daughter in skating and hockey and tennis and all these other things, it allows me to coach, but I'm coaching my own child. Makes such a difference. But man, time goes by so fast that I just can't imagine not seeing your children or your teenagers for weeks and months on end, sometimes years. To me, that's what losing looks like. So I just wanted to share that Super Bowl story. I always see a coach, being lifted onto the shoulders of his players. Not Andy Reid. They'd never get him up there. He's a big boy, Andy. I'll never forget after he won the AFC or NFC, whatever division he's in, 3 years ago. And he's heading to the Super Bowl, and they asked him the next day, said, "What'd you do after you won the AFC or NFC championship last night? Party time, restaurant, and you're heading to the Super Bowl." He goes, "I went home, had 3 cheeseburgers, and went to sleep." Andy Reid, I went home, I had 3 cheeseburgers, and I went to sleep. No shit. Putting in 20-hour days, getting there. People think the players celebrate. The coaches go pass out and go to sleep. Players celebrate, coaches pass out and go to sleep. But Andy Reid, 3 cheeseburgers in bed, and then 2 weeks of prep for the Super Bowl. Love Andy Reid. Love that guy. So that's it for today. If you're interested in more of, look at that behind me. Isn't that amazing? Every day, almost every day, I get that gift of that sunrise. I love sunrises. My wife loves sunsets, but I'm an early guy. I love the sunrises. Look at that on a Monday. Tell me life isn't a gift, right? Tell me life isn't a gift. The good, the bad, the ugly, it's a gift. So, pretty amazing. Look at that. I'm gonna go a little bit further today. So, that's it for me. If you haven't got a copy of my book or you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, you can do that below at nobullbook.com or badassletter.com. I'm in the process of writing the February newsletter right now. It's my world building letter. You can get a copy of it and one of these badass t-shirts thrown in for free if you subscribe at badassletter.com. Badassletter.com. That's it for today. 2 words that changed my life, 2 words that'll change your life. Be relentless.